Whew, church. I have been thinking quite a bit about this Isaiah passage this week. And one of the first places I started was thinking about this line where he talks about fools. And foolishness is something that I think about a lot as a pastor, because I talk to folks who are having to deal so much with foolishness. I've been counseling, particularly some women, but not just women. And sometimes they'll come to me and they'll show me a text message that as they go out and seek love in life, they'll show me this text, and it will reflect a kind of exchange that doesn't necessarily reflect love. And what it actually is foolishness. And I say to them, since when did this foolishness seem normal to you? And in what ways does that feel like love? And I think there are many ways that we have to recognize that foolishness is not the reigning day, and that God does not endorse that. And sometimes when we're in community, we look for foolishness and we just need to say no. But that's not the only thing to know about being a fool. Because as we hear in the Isaiah passage, he says, "Be strong, do not fear. A highway shall be there, and it shall be called the Holy Way, and no traveler, not even fools, shall go astray." And so this is interesting to me, because in many ways I feel like there's no room for a fool in my life, but interestingly enough, there's plenty of room for a fool in God's. And that's helpful too, because so many times what happens is that as we try to walk the highway of God's love, as we try to walk ourselves closer and know more about Jesus and God's incredible plans for our lives, sometimes we wander off the road. And we do get lost, and we wonder how we can find ourselves back. And what Isaiah here is proclaiming is that there's no way that we can go astray, that God will always bring us back. And sometimes we might need to see our very own foolishness and acknowledge it and know that it's still going to be just fine. And I want to sit with that promise that all shall be well, and all manner of things shall be well. Because so many times we get lost in the world of thinking that it won't. We get lost thinking that we can't. Now, can't is a profound word, and it can also be a very dangerous one in spiritual terms. So let's spend some time with that. I want to talk a little bit about the politics of can't. Now, there are plenty of things that we will say that we can't do, and we really shouldn't. We can't and shouldn't do things that compromise our integrity. We can't and shouldn't do things that will harm other people. Those are good can'ts. But I want to spend a little bit more time on the things that we very well know or feel that we should do, but then we claim that we can't. I've got lots of those, and they can be as simple or as important. For example, I realize that I should work out about 5 times a week, but I can't seem to figure out how to get myself to do that. I realize that I should not eat out quite so much as I do, because Lord knows what's in the food. Or maybe I do know what's in the food, and maybe I shouldn't be eating that. But I can't seem to get myself to cook every night, because my schedule is pretty busy. You know, we all have our coulds, our shoulds, and our can'ts. And sometimes, and I would imagine for each of us in this room and for every single person, there is a major should that is taking root in your life that you just can't figure out how to confront. And sometimes that issue can be so big and it can loom so large that it can almost come to define us as a stumbling block before we move forward on this great and vast highway. And I would like to proclaim to you that what Isaiah is promising right here is that in a sea of can'ts, look at that list of things. Just take a look at it. There's a sea of can'ts here. There were the blind who could not see, but their eyes shall be opened, Isaiah says. The ears of the deaf, they could not hear, but those ears will be unstopped. The lame shall leap like a deer. The tongue of the speechless sing for joy. Even the deserts will break forth in water. And all these things that seem absolutely impossible will happen. And what if that were also true for you? Now, it can be hard. It can be really hard to turn a can't into a can. And in so many places, we gather and we talk through, like, how can we make this different? Just the other day at my home, I had a group of some black women who are feeling called to ministry over to my house. And we were talking through all of the challenges that they faced. And one young woman said to me that she had, there's a woman who's in charge of development for the school she goes to. And this woman had put all this time into recruiting these young men to come and study in the ministry. And they said, you know what, we're going to be able to promise you an endowed pulpit as soon as you graduate. And she said to me, and they made all these promises to the men, and here I am in my tradition, and they're supposed to be able to be women in the church. And she said, and that person in development doesn't even know my name, and I'm graduating this year. There are so many places where women have been called to do things, but then told they can't. Or maybe they won't be told they can't, and they'll say, oh yeah, go ahead, you can do it, but they won't be given any jobs or opportunities. And there's this issue in the church for women of color or women in general, where we get siloed into places of can because that's where you're okay to be. So you can teach our children, but you can't stand in our pulpit. You can go ahead and, be secretaries and serve in every possible way in the church, but you can't be in the lead role because, maybe you could, or maybe someone could, but we haven't found anyone who's qualified just yet, or maybe we're just not quite ready. That's an example of a can't that seems to have come over church all over the place. And even here, it took 206 years to get a woman into the senior minister role of this church. Right? 206 years, but it has happened. And what we need to see and to proclaim all around is that day after day, there are beautiful moments where God has turned an historic can't into a can. While we were all talking about these moments of can't in front of us, the Reverend Professor Ebony Marshall Turman turned to us and she said, you know what? There's a lot of people who might try to stand in our way, but I want to proclaim to you this. Black women have a history of making a way out of no way. Black women have a history of making a way out of no way. And it isn't that black women exclusively have done it, but that is our brand. And that's how we've done it. And so I just want to proclaim to you today that maybe look to these places where we have been historically oppressed and say, you know what, Isaiah has told us that that will not be so any longer. The promises, folks, have been made. The promises are here, and with those promises, then what are you gonna do? Because there is a can't right now that should not be whispering the words of no and don't try and don't believe in your heart. There is a word of can't that is trying to hold you back. And by the way, the rich and the powerful are surrounded by so much can, right? They're just surrounded by so much can, and their can depends on our believing that we cannot. And so, how do we then claim and proclaim and step into these promises that have been made. Be strong. Take courage and try. Be strong. Take courage and try. For these promises that have been made, what will you do? How will you show up? How will you wait? How will you listen? How will you know that God has made these promises so that you can do something profound for this world that is waiting for you? How will you take courage in the Lord? How will you begin anew in a way that leaves no one out of the profoundness of the love that you can share? How will you wait on the Lord in a way that is active and faithful and pushes you into a new realm that maybe you didn't think you could go before? How will you believe in God's promises and know that they are real and right and true for you? Because the truth is that it's time to shift into this place of can. We talk about Advent being a season of hope and waiting. We wait. We wait on God. But what we might need to realize is that God is also waiting on us. God is waiting for us to believe something past our stuckness. Because when we live in a world of can't, way too many things get stuck in place that need to be moving. And how do we need to move and trust in God in a new way that will move us forward on this beautiful highway that even a fool couldn't stumble off of? You, God's beloved, are invited to try and to know that the possibilities of trying, the ability to turn what has been into what can be, and not to be stuck in the world that would hold you down. That moment is yours right now. So what if today? What if today God didn't have to wait anymore? What if today God said, you know what? Now we're walking again. Now we're moving. What if today was that day for you? What would it take to set aside that can't and live into the profundity of God's can? Amen?